You are going to spend about 9.3 hours this week just looking for information you already have.
Which is honestly just a staggering number when you actually hear it out loud.
It really is. Think about that for a second. Almost an entire working day lost to just digging through your downloads folder or searching old Slack threads, trying to remember if that one brilliant idea was in a notebook or an email or, some random Google Doc.
Right. It's exhausting.
Totally. Because right now, your brain and your digital life are basically functioning like a completely overloaded, glitchy operating system. You've got 40 tabs open, the fan is screaming, and the whole thing feels like it could crash at any second.
Yeah, and that's because it's a crisis of architecture, really. We're constantly trying to run this modern, high-speed, infinite scroll software on biological hardware that evolved, thousands of years ago.
Which is exactly our mission for this deep dive today. We are going through a massive stack of sources to build you the ultimate personal operating system.
Because the human brain just wasn't built to process the sheer volume of data we force into it every single day.
Exactly. So we're going to bridge your biological hardware, like how you actually regulate your nervous system and wire in new skills with your digital software. Basically how you build a second brain to handle the information avalanche.
But before we even touch a keyboard or look at an app, we really have to look at the machine running it all. We have to optimize the biological hardware first.
Oh, for sure. And honestly, the data in our sources on how our hardware is holding up right now is grim. Take high performers and entrepreneurs, for example.
That stat was wild.
Right. The National Institute of Mental Health found that 49% of entrepreneurs struggle with mental health issues, compared to 32% of the general population. Why is our hardware failing so spectacularly under pressure?
Well, it's basically because of a fundamental design flaw in how we process threats.
Yeah.
Inside your brain right now, there is this constant, invisible turf war happening.
Okay, a turf war between what?
On one side, you have the amygdala. This is your primitive fear and threat center. It's incredibly fast, and, it's designed to keep you alive if a tiger jumps out of the bushes.
Right, the survival instinct.
Exactly. But on the other side, you have the prefrontal cortex. That's the modern, rational part of your brain that handles logic, executive function, and long-term planning.
So they're fighting for resources.
Constantly. When you are under extreme stress, say a client threatens to pull a contract, or you get a massive unexpected bill, your brain literally doesn't know the difference between a financial threat and a physical tiger.
Wow. So it just reacts the same way.
Yeah, the amygdala initiates a hijack.
Yeah.
It literally draws blood flow and energy away from the prefrontal cortex.
Yeah.
Your logic center just shuts down.
So, to use our computer metaphor, emotional reactivity is basically a bad software glitch causing a fatal memory leak.
That's a perfect way to visualize it.
Like a background process fear or anxiety starts hoarding all the CPU power, and your rational brain just freezes. You end up snapping at an employee or sending a passive-aggressive email because the system crashed.
Right. And to fix that memory leak, the sources point to a framework called positive intelligence. It introduces a concept known as PQ reps.
PQ reps, what are those?
They're essentially 10-second mental workouts to build up your self-command muscle. So when you feel that amygdala hijack, starting your chest gets tight, your breathing gets shallow.
Yeah, we've all felt that panic setting in.
Exactly. You deliberately shift all of your attention to a physical sensation for just 10 seconds. You focus entirely on the feeling of your feet on the floor or the texture of your fingertips rubbing together.
Okay, wait, let me push back on this a little bit. Taking 10 seconds to feel my toes is going to fix a deeply ingrained emotional glitch.
I know how it sounds.
If someone is dealing with severe chronic burnout or trauma, doesn't a 10-second fix sound incredibly reductive?
Well, it sounds reductive if you view it as a one-time cure, which it isn't. The magic here isn't the 10 seconds itself, it's neuroplasticity.
Ah, okay. The brain rewiring itself.
Right. Neuroplasticity is the brain's physical ability to reorganize itself by forming new neural pathways. Every single time you interrupt that stress response, even for just a few seconds, you're actively weakening the neural superhighway that leads to the amygdala's panic button.
So you're basically starving that pathway of traffic.
Exactly. And you are paving a new road to the prefrontal cortex. It's not an instant fix. It is a micro-habit. Over hundreds or thousands of repetitions, you physically alter your brain's baseline.
That makes a lot more sense.
And this is really the difference between emotional intelligence, which is just knowing you're upset, and emotional maturity, which is having the biological infrastructure to pause and not act on it.
Wow, that distinction between intelligence and maturity is huge, especially when the sources talk about what psychologists call emotional fusion.
Oh yeah, emotional fusion is a big one.
That's where your self-worth is so enmeshed with other people's opinions that you don't even have your own emotional baseline anymore. You just endlessly react to their validation or criticism.
Which is an exhausting way to live.
Completely. But if neuroplasticity allows us to physically rewire our emotional reactions, we can use that exact same biological mechanism to fast-track how we learn and build habits. Right?
Precisely. If we want to actively program new skills without just, white-knuckling it through sheer willpower, we have to understand the brain's two parallel learning systems.
Right. The sources had that really fascinating Swedish research that mapped this out.
Yeah. So first, you have the reward-based system. This is driven entirely by dopamine. It's that rush of excitement you get when you buy a new planner or decide you're going to learn a new language.
Oh man, it's the January 1st energy.
Exactly. It's great, but dopamine is a volatile fuel. It burns out quickly.
By January 12th.
Right, that's where the second system has to take over. The repetition-based system, which lives deep in a midbrain region called the striatum.
And the striatum does not care about your excitement.
It does not care about your motivation, your vision board, or your new planner. It only understands repetition.
Which perfectly explains the concept of ego depletion from the deep dive. This is the idea that willpower is a finite biological resource.
Yes, it literally depletes as you make decisions throughout the day.
So if I decide I'm going to learn how to code at 8 p.m. after a long workday, relying on dopamine or willpower is a completely losing strategy. My tank is empty.
You're trying to start a car with a dead battery.
So what do we do instead?
To bypass ego depletion, you have to rely on environmental design and what behavioral scientists call the 2-minute rule.
Make it easy.
Make it incredibly frictionless to start. You make the habit so small that you don't need willpower. You just need 2 minutes. Because once you start, the striatum can take the wheel on autopilot.
Okay, so once we get the striatum engaged and we bypass that friction, how do we actually accelerate the learning? Because honestly, nobody has time to spend 10,000 hours mastering every new software or skill they need for work.
No, absolutely not.
I loved the idea from the sources of applying the Pareto principle here, the 80-20 rule. You identify the critical 20% of a skill that is going to yield 80% of the results.
Right, but you can't just casually practice that 20%.
Yeah.
You have to use Anders Ericsson's model of deliberate practice.
Which sounds intense.
Deliberate practice is ruthless. You aren't just going through the motions. You are isolating that high-yield 20%, drilling it, and getting immediate feedback.
So it's very active.
Very active. And a massive part of that is how you process the information you're taking in. For example, the Cornell note-taking technique is a brilliant mechanism for this.
I remember seeing that. It's the structural design for a page, right?
Yeah, you divide the page into 3 sections. A large area for your main notes, a narrow column on the left for cues or questions, and a box at the bottom for a summary.
But why does that specific layout matter, though? Why can't I just jot things down in a bulleted list like I always do?
Because a standard bulleted list is just passive transcription. The Cornell method forces active synthesis.
I see.
Those cues on the left-hand side force you to create questions that your notes answer. When you review, you cover the main notes and just look at the cues, forcing your brain to actively retrieve the information.
That sounds uncomfortable, honestly.
It is uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But that discomfort is literally the feeling of neural pathways solidifying.
Wow. And you compare that with the blurting method, right? You read a complex chapter, close the book, and literally blurt out. Just write down everything you can possibly remember on a blank page.
Yes, it exposes the gaps in your knowledge instantly.
And speaking of writing, the research heavily favors handwritten notes over digital typing for memory encoding, which surprised me, even though typing is so much faster. I type at 90 words a minute, but apparently that's actually hurting my learning.
It is, yeah. Because typing 90 words a minute allows you to become a human stenographer.
I'm just a court reporter for my own life.
Exactly. You are just dictating the words as they are spoken. You bypass the prefrontal cortex entirely.
Because it's too easy.
Right. But when you write by hand, you physically cannot keep up with the speed of speech. Your brain is forced to listen, quickly analyze the concept, distill it into its core meaning, and write that summary down. The friction of handwriting is the very thing that creates comprehension.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting to me. There's also data in our stack showing that just 12 minutes of meditation 5 times a week can drastically increase your baseline focus and ability to absorb all this.
12 minutes is nothing, really.
It's nothing. But wait, I have to stop and challenge this whole accelerated learning culture.
Okay, go for it.
If we are constantly looking for the 20% shortcut, or we're only meditating so we can squeeze out 12 more minutes of productivity, aren't we losing the soul of actual mastery? Is all this hacking actually destroying deep comprehension?
Well, that is the exact danger of the productivity trap. But the distinction to keep in mind here is efficiency versus depth.
Okay, how so?
Finding the 20% isn't about avoiding the hard work of mastery. It's about making sure your hard work is aimed at the right target.
Ah, I get it.
If you practice the wrong guitar chords for 4 years, you've worked incredibly hard, but you haven't mastered the instrument. Deliberate practice just ensures your biological hardware is processing the right data.
That's a great point.
But you're right to point out our limits, because eventually, no matter how much you optimize your dopamine or how pristine your Cornell notes are, the human brain simply runs out of RAM.
We just cannot hold it all.
We can't.
Which is the perfect pivot to our software. We've hit the biological limit. Now we have to offload the excess to the machine. We need a personal knowledge management system, or a PKM.
Yes, the PKM.
We started this deep dive with that brutal McKinsey statistic. 1.8 hours a day, which is 9.3 hours a week, completely lost to searching for information. How do we build a system that stops that bleeding?
Well, first we have to move away from treating our computers like a junk drawer and start using the DIKW model.
DIKW, data, information, knowledge, and wisdom, right?
Exactly. Right now, most people are drowning in data. Just raw, unorganized numbers, stacks, and downloaded PDFs. Your PKM system needs a workflow that captures that data, organizes it so it becomes information, synthesizes it into knowledge, and eventually allows you to apply it as wisdom.
And the way modern tools handle this is a total paradigm shift. If you look at platforms like Obsidian, Cascade, or Notion, they are entirely ditching traditional folder structures.
Oh yeah, folders are dead.
Right, they're replacing them with bidirectional linking and tags.
The problem with a traditional folder is that it forces you to make a permanent binary decision about where a piece of information lives.
Yeah, like if I have a great article about the psychology of stress, do I put it in my health folder or my work management folder?
Right, it's a structural trap.
Traditional folders are like parking spaces, one car per spot. If the article is parked in health, it can't be parked in work. But bidirectional linking is more like a subway map.
I love that analogy.
Thanks. A single idea becomes a station, and it can connect to a dozen different conceptual transit lines simultaneously. It actually mirrors how human association works in our own neural networks.
Exactly.
But, okay, here's my practical concern. If I'm suddenly tagging every thought, linking every article, and building this massive subway map of a second brain, doesn't that just become a second full-time job?
It definitely can.
Like, how do we prevent this from turning into digital hoarding, where we spend hours meticulously organizing things we will literally never look at again?
It absolutely will become a second job if you focus on the storage rather than the retrieval. The antidote to digital hoarding is strict workflow design. You don't need a perfectly categorized archives. You need an actionable dashboard.
Okay, let's get tactical with that. Instead of getting bogged down in which buttons to click, what is the actual philosophy behind building a unified dashboard in a tool like Notion?
The philosophy is about centralizing context to protect your attention span.
Protect the prefrontal cortex again.
Exactly. Every time you switch tabs from a project brief to a spreadsheet to a Slack message, your brain suffers a cognitive switching penalty. It drains that ego depletion we talked about.
Right.
A well-designed Notion dashboard creates a single pane of glass. In the tutorials from the sources, like Alex Cunningham's breakdown, you build one master database for everything you do.
By just typing /database, right?
Yep. Then, on your daily dashboard, you create filtered views. You don't see the whole chaotic database, you just see a Kanban board of what is active today. You delete the default view entirely. Or use a blank table to view all workspace data sources at once.
And you can pull in outside context without ever leaving that page. Notion uses a service called iFramely, which lets you embed live interactive content from over 1,900 different domains.
It's incredible.
You can have a live Miro whiteboard, a Google Drive folder, and a Spotify focused playlist functioning right inside your Notion dashboard. You literally never open another tab.
Exactly. And other platforms are pushing this boundary even further. Like Workflow, which just had its 50th anniversary. They recently rolled out timeline method and a huge OCR feature.
Optical character recognition, right?
Yes, it means you can drop an image of a whiteboard or a screenshot into your notes, and the software automatically reads the text inside the image and makes it searchable and editable. It removes the friction of data entry entirely. You can even pipe text straight from emails with workflow now.
But the real magic, the thing that truly prevents you from having to do the manual labor of digital hoarding, is automation. And that brings us to Zapier.
Oh, Zapier's a game changer.
Zapier is essentially the central nervous system for your digital body. But a lot of people hear automation and get intimidated. How does Zapier actually connect apps that were never designed to talk to each other?
It uses APIs, which are application programming interfaces.
Okay, what does that actually mean?
Think of an API like a waiter at a restaurant. You are sitting at the table, which is one app, let's say Google Sheets. The kitchen is another app, like a specialized approval software called Approve It.
Okay, tracking so far.
You can't just walk into the kitchen and start cooking. You need the waiter, the API, to take your specific order from the table, hand it to the kitchen, and bring the finished dish back. Zapier acts as the ultimate head waiter. It holds the API keys for over 5,000 different apps. So when a new row is added in Google Sheets, Zapier instantly sees it, runs to approve it, and triggers an inbound workflow automatically. The human never touches it.
That is incredibly efficient. But again, I have to play devil's advocate here.
Do it.
If Zapier is moving our data, and OCR is reading our images, and AI is summarizing our notes, do we risk checking out entirely? If the machine does all the synthesis, aren't we bypassing the deliberate practice and the friction that we just established is required to actually learn anything?
It's the grand paradox of automation, really.
Yeah.
If you use automation to summarize a book you want to understand deeply, yes, you are cheating your own neuroplasticity. You will learn absolutely nothing.
Right.
The goal of automating the mundane-like data entry, file routing, or generating task lists is not so you can tune out. It's to aggressively protect your prefrontal cortex from decision fatigue.
So you're saving the fuel for the right fire.
Exactly.
Oh.
You automate the low-level administrative work so you have the cognitive energy and the actual hours to tune in to the high-level, deeply human work that a machine cannot do.
Which brings this entire journey to its most important point, the human element. We did not just design a system to save 9.3 hours a week so you could cram 9.3 more hours of spreadsheets into your life.
But I have not.
The ultimate goal of optimizing your hardware and automating your software is to be more present in your actual life, especially in your relationships.
So nothing tests our emotional hardware quite like human relationships. Our conflict patterns are largely dictated by attachment theory.
Right, from early childhood.
Yes, based on how our caregivers responded to us, we programmed an emotional operating system. Generally, people fall into secure, anxious, or avoidant attachment styles.
I found the insight on avoidant attachment from the deep dive particularly eye-opening. When someone with an avoidant style is stressed or in an argument, their instinct is to withdraw and rely completely on logic to create distance.
Yes, you retreat to safety.
And the key to communicating with them isn't to debate the facts. You have to validate their emotion even if you think their logic is completely flawed.
Because if you attack their logic, you are just feeding the amygdala's threat response.
Yeah.
It will dig their heels in or completely shut down.
Right.
But when you say, I can see why you feel incredibly overwhelmed right now, you bypass the threat detector. You signal safety. Validating the emotion doesn't mean you agree with the behavior. It means you are de-escalating the nervous system.
And when we fail to do that, we end up in what relationship experts call the argument hangover.
Oh, the worst feeling.
It's that awful, tense, agonizing silence in the house after a fight where nobody wants to be the first one to speak. Shortening that hangover is crucial. And one of the strategies from the Gottman method in our sources is to initiate a physical reset.
This is my favorite part of the research.
It sounds ridiculous, but the advice is literally to shake your ass. You physically shake your body, put on a song, and move. Why does something so silly actually work to resolve a fight?
Because it forces a state change. When you are furious, your body is locked in a physiological stress loop. Cortisol and adrenaline are pumping.
You're in fight or flight.
Right. You can't just logic your way out of those chemicals.
Yeah.
Shaking your body or doing something physically unexpected breaks the tension. It is the somatic full-body version of the 10-second PQ rep we discussed at the very beginning.
Oh, wow. That ties it all together perfectly.
Yeah, it interrupts the loop and brings the prefrontal cortex back online so you can actually look at your partner with empathy instead of defense. defensiveness.
It's the perfect irony. We just spent all this time talking about how to use Zapier to flawlessly route data and how to use Notion to build beautiful interconnected dashboards. But you absolutely cannot automate an apology.
No, you can't.
You cannot put a vulnerable conversation on a Kanban board. So let me ask you, if we apply the 2-minute rule of habit formation to our human relationships, what is the smallest possible micro habit we can do daily to build a more secure attachment?
The smallest, most powerful micro habit is simply the act of turning toward your partner's bids for connection.
Bids for connection.
Yeah. Throughout the day, people constantly make tiny bids for attention. They sigh heavily, or they point out a weird bird out the window, or they send you a random meme.
Just little reaches for contact.
Exactly. Taking just 2 seconds to look up from your screen, engage, and say, "What is it?" Or, "That's funny," is the relational equivalent of building a bi-directional link in your second brain.
That is so profound.
You are actively reinforcing the neural pathway of trust. Every time you turn toward them, you prove that they matter more than the screen. And that is the true hallmark of mastery.
To sum it all up, we need a highly regulated, emotionally mature biological mind, paired with a cleanly structured, automated digital environment.
Exactly. The digital software gives us the time. The biological hardware gives us the capacity to actually connect.
That is the ultimate personal operating system. Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We've covered everything from the neuroplasticity of the striatum to the API handshakes of Zapier.
It's been quite a ride.
It really has. But as you step back into your day, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over. We just explored how your brain builds neural pathways the exact same way your digital sizes it. Second brain builds bidirectional links. Everything connects to everything else.
Right.
So if someone were to look at the links you are actively building in your own mind right now, the media you compulsively consume, the self-talk you repeat in the shower, the minor arguments you hold on to, what kind of operating system would they say you are programming for yourself? Is it one designed to crash under the weight of the world? Or is it one designed to thrive? Until next time, take a look at your own mental dashboard and maybe, just maybe, shake it off.